Psalms 108:1 through 109:31. Devotional focus verse. Give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man. Through God we shall do valiantly, for he it is that shall tread down our enemies. Psalm 108:12 through 13. During World War II, the compassionate and devout family of watchmaker Casper provided refuge for people fleeing the Nazi secret police in Holland. A small secret area was created behind one wall of daughter Corrie's tiny bedroom on the uppermost story of the family home. Access to this 30-inch deep hiding place was gained by crawling on hands and knees through a cupboard's panel, which was carefully stained on the exterior to blend with its surroundings. With ventilation to the outside, this tiny cubicle could temporarily hold a handful of refugees. Often as many as 7 people, Jews and members of the Dutch underground, were housed in the Ten Boom home. The family and their associated contacts within the network of the Haarlem underground saved the lives of an estimated 800 Jews and protected many Dutch underground workers. Because of their involvement in sheltering enemies of the Third Reich, the Ten Boom home was raided in early 1944, and all members of the family were imprisoned. When Corrie's 84-year-old father was asked if he knew he could be killed for helping Jews, he replied, "It would be an honor to give my life for God's ancient people." He died after only 10 days in prison. Some family members were subsequently released, but Corrie and her sister Betsy remained incarcerated. During their imprisonment, they were moved to 3 different prisons, the last being the infamous Ravensbrück concentration camp near Berlin, Germany. While incarcerated, Corrie and Betsy shared God's love with their fellow prisoners, reading scriptures and praying with them, and many were led to Christ. Through their spiritual focus and steadfast commitment to God, the two encouraged their fellow prisoners and were able to avoid sinking to the level of their captors. Corrie and her sister proved the truth of our focus verse, that through God we shall do valiantly. Although Betsy died at Ravensbrück, she never relinquished her trust in God. And Corrie survived. After her miraculous release, Corrie realized that life was a gift, and she needed to share what she and Betsy had learned. She began an international ministry that took her into more than 60 countries in the next 32 years. She testified frequently that their strength and courage came from the power of God. He was the divine source which enabled them to endure and triumph over the evil of their enemies. She was tireless in proclaiming the message that Jesus is victor. Though we may go through trials here in this life, God can give us strength and courage to do valiantly in the face of every foe. Like Corrie and Betsy Ten Boom, we can be confident that our ultimate deliverance is sure. Background information. Psalm 108. Psalm 108 is comprised of the endings of 2 previous psalms. Verses 1 through 5 are taken from Psalm 57, 7 through 11, which tells of David's determination to trust God while fleeing from King Saul in the desert of En-Gedi, 1 Samuel 24. Verse 5, which concludes this portion, gives the purpose of this psalm, to exalt God with the highest praise and honor. Verses 6 through 13 are from Psalm 60, 5 through 12, in which David expressed his confidence in God's deliverance in spite of troubling military circumstances. Comparing the historical accounts in 2 Samuel 8, 13 through 14, 1 Kings 11, 15 through 16, and 1 Chronicles 18, 12 through 13 reveals that while David was fighting with his army in the north against the Ammonites and Syrians, he received word that the Edomites had attacked their nation from the south. In verses 7 through 9, David related that God had said he would conquer all the land of Canaan, including the nations within, Shechem, and the nations without, Succoth. He had also said he would bring back those who followed Saul, Gilead and Manasseh, make Ephraim his army, and established Judah as the seat of his government. Moab would be a servant, one who washes feet, Edom a slave, one who carries shoes, and Philistia a trophy. In verses 10 through 13, David acknowledged that such a victory could not be accomplished by man alone, but he was certain that with God's help they would prevail. Psalm 109. Psalm 109 is a prayer ascribed to David, in which he asks God to defend him against his enemies and reward them according to their sinful deeds. It is dedicated to the chief musician. The term Natsach, translated as chief musician, occurs in the titles of 55 psalms, all but 2 of which were authored by David. Psalm 109 is the last of the imprecatory psalms and expresses special indignation against liars and slanderers. The background for this psalm is not established, but it may have been Saul's persecution of David instigated by Doeg, or Absalom's rebellion and the treachery of Ahithophel. In either case, the psalmist's complaint clearly was set in historical circumstances and was not just a general cry to God for the punishment of the wicked. The maledictions, curses or calling down of judgment, in this psalm must be understood in context of the Old Testament revelation of God and His ways, compared to Christ's New Testament teachings of love and justice. For example, David asked in verse 6 that his enemy be ruled by a wicked man, and that Satan would stand at his right hand, a position typically taken by a trusted counselor or advisor. In verse 11, he pleaded that the extortioner would catch or seize all that his enemy had. The statement that strangers would spoil his enemy's labor could be translated, plunder the fruits of his toil. In verses 21 through 31, the psalmist turned from contemplating vengeance upon his enemies to a consideration of the goodness of God and his hope for vindication. As is often the case in psalms of lament, David ended with a vow to praise God, his great defender. Conclusion. We may encounter cruel people or face unjust persecution along life's pathway. However, we know that God will mete out ultimate justice. In the meantime, He can give us strength and grace to endure.
Psalm 108. O God, my heart is fixed, I will sing and give praise, even with my glory. Awake, psaltery and harp, I myself will awake early. I will praise Thee, O Lord, among the people, and I will sing praises unto Thee among the nations. For Thy mercy is great above the heavens, and Thy truth reacheth unto the clouds. Be Thou exalted, O God, above the heavens, and Thy glory above all the earth. That Thy beloved may be delivered, save with Thy right hand, and answer me. God hath spoken in His holiness, I will rejoice, I will divide Shechem, and mete out the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, Ephraim also is the strength of mine head, Judah is my lawgiver. Moab is my washpot, over Edom will I cast out my shoe, over Philistia will I triumph. Who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? Wilt not Thou, O God, who hast cast us off? And wilt not Thou, O God, go forth with our hosts? Give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man. Through God we shall do valiantly, for He it is that shall tread down our enemies. Psalm 109. Hold not Thy peace, O God of my praise. For the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are opened against me, they have spoken against me with a lying tongue. They compassed me about also with words of hatred, and fought against me without a cause. For my love they are my adversaries, but I give myself unto prayer. And they have rewarded me evil for good, and hatred for my love. Set Thou a wicked man over him, and let Satan stand at his right hand. When he shall be judged, let him be condemned, and let his prayer become sin. Let his days be few, and let another take his office. Let his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. Let his children be continually vagabonds, and beg, let them seek their bread also out of their desolate places. Let the extortioner catch all that he hath, and let the stranger spoil his labor. Let there be none to extend mercy unto him, neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children. Let his posterity be cut off, and in the generation following let their name be blotted out. Let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered with the Lord, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Let them be before the Lord continually, that he may cut off the memory of them from the earth. Because that he remembered not to show mercy, but persecuted the poor and needy man, that he might even slay the broken in heart. As he loved cursing, so let it come unto him, as he delighted not in blessing, so let it be far from him. As he clothed himself with cursing like as with his garment, so let it come into his bowels like water, and like oil into his bones. Let it be unto him as the garment which covereth him, and for a girdle wherewith he is girded continually. Let this be the reward of mine adversaries from the Lord, and of them that speak evil against my soul. But do thou for me, O God the Lord, for thy name's sake, because thy mercy is good, deliver thou me. For I am poor and needy, and my heart is wounded within me. I am gone like the shadow when it declineth, I am tossed up and down as the locust. My knees are weak through fasting, and my flesh faileth of fatness. I became also a reproach unto them, when they looked upon me they shake their heads. Help me, O Lord my God, O save me according to thy mercy. That they may know that this is thy hand, that thou, Lord, hast done it. Let them curse, but bless thou, when they arise, let them be ashamed, but let thy servant rejoice. Let mine adversaries be clothed with shame, and let them cover themselves with their own confusion, as with a mantle. I will greatly praise the Lord with my mouth, yea, I will praise him among the multitude. For he shall stand at the right hand of the poor, to save him from those that condemn his soul.